Hello, everybody. Can you hear us? All right. It's just after 11. We have multiple people attending by Zoom. And so we'll start off. Thank you for everybody attending. My name is Philip Miller. I'm a lawyer that'll be representing this litigation. We have copies of the claim that we can email to the participants who are in the press conference today at the end of it. We're here today because we're dealing with a circumstance in which a town council has abused their power and discriminated against a local business that was trying to provide services to the First Nations community as part of a movement to reconcile, to heal, and to improve community relations. And unfortunately, they've been stalled and obstructed at every stage. Well, what I'm going to do is introduce the panel, but before we start, I'm going to have Charlene Burns start us off with it. The reason we're here today is the principals behind the Bashaw Retreat Center have no options left but to commence litigation as they've been obstructed in the provision of a wellness retreat that would have serviced vulnerable First Nations families in the community. And the center had previously been used by members of the community and even some First Nations people. But when the business application was put forward to approve the use of this, we have a good faith basis of alleging that there was deliberate prejudice and discrimination to prevent this wellness retreat that was catering to vulnerable First Nations families from operating. And who I have here today is James Carpenter. He's the principal of the Bashaw Wellness Center, who owns, along with Tony, I don't want to wreck the name, Mucciaroni. They were the originating minds behind this venture that was going to provide a wonderful place for vulnerable people in the community to go and heal, to improve their lives. And they will be available to speak. I also have Russell Burns, who's a First Nations advocate. He was a consultant to the project, and he will talk about how positive and optimistic everything about this venture was, and the damage that was done to the First Nations communities by realizing that it wasn't going to be allowed to go forward. And we have Charlene Burns, who is first and foremost an elder and a grandmother, and somebody who grew up in the community, who actually attended residential school in the community, and who can speak to how important this venture would have been to families, mothers, and the communities had it been allowed to go forward, and the impact on the community. So I'll hand it over to James to talk about where he comes from.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, James, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay. So I never thought
We cannot hear you anymore.
Can Just wait one second, I'm gonna test audio. So. Hello? One second. They can hear me here, like it's showing here.
Yes, you are heard clear there.
All right. Okay.
But you cannot hear James now.
Oh. Just one, yeah, I guess I'll just move people into my seat and I'll take just. You spend a fortune on a system and it doesn't work. Can you hear me now, Ilya?
Yes.
All right. All right. So we're just going to play musical chairs. Can you hear me okay, Ilya?
Perfect.
All right. So I never thought we'd be sitting here today, but we are here today, and we're here because a group of people came together in 2017 with a dream of working with communities in the region to work a family wellness center. A family wellness center basically is a center where a whole family group would come in, and the vision behind the Bashaw Retreat Center, which was then named Bear Hills Family Wellness Center, was that we would have up to 5 families at a time come into this center, and they would bring up to 5 family members. So in most cases, a mother and a father and 3 children. And somewhere along the line, the narrative just could never explain the narrative of what we were actually doing, even though at some points we provided over 900 pages of material of what was actually going to go on in this facility. Somehow we were caught in this cloud, frankly, that became overwhelming, confusing, and discouraging. In 2017, Bashaw Retreat Center was given the ability to host festivals and weddings and events. And we started working with our Indigenous neighbors at Masquachis, and we had some retreats there and some visions of where we wanted to go. And to then attend to the town and ask for just a letter of support, we were sent down a path that we had to change our use on the building, which, you know, we questioned and we're like, what are you talking about? We're already doing this sort of stuff. And we ended up down a series of rabbit trails that stretched almost 2 years. And it's sad because we could have actually affected almost 40 families at this point. And the missed opportunity to build into the lives of people and the opportunity that would have been for the community of Bashaw from being a part of that, being welcomed in to the retreat center, to actually being employed by the retreat center, and the economic spin-offs that would have been for the community are frankly bizarre. And I never thought that I would have to stand up and literally have to call foul. But there's no other words for what's going on here. And we've had other people that have come forward, yet we're in a community of 800 people where we know we had community support. And it came down to a few leaders that decided to stand in the way of something that could have been absolutely wonderful for not only the First Nations, but for the community of Bashaw. And it's very sad. And I've shed tears. We've all shed tears because we've worked so hard for this. And I think of what about the people that needed this? I needed this. And, you know, sitting 20 minutes from where the Pope visited this last summer and attempts to repair and help people heal and to seek reconciliation. At the same time, we had the town of Bashaw undermining, interfering, throwing up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, telling us that we didn't have enough information about what we were doing. Then when we provided more, they wanted more information. Then when we provided 980 pages of information or 34 pages, they said it was too much information. Then we had to neck it down to 45 pages of information, and then to be told they still don't understand what we're doing is frankly bizarre. And it saddens me. And it's time that somebody had to answer for these actions. We've swept too many things under the carpet. And I've decided to stand with my First Nations friends. And I should have done it a long time ago. And it breaks my heart.
I'm Dr. Tony. This is a really difficult thing for me to be in because I worked in the community of Bashaw for 13 years and I got to know the people there quite well. And in talking to people there, I know that there was a lot of community support for this project. People would tell me on a daily basis. And yes, there were a few that were naysayers, but ultimately, most people wanted this to happen because not only was it going to be good for Musqueam, but it was also going to be good for them. So it really does break my heart because I'm torn. I'm torn between helping my friends and not wanting to do anything against the town of Bashaw, but I have to stand and do what's right. And part of what's right is knowing that the citizens, well, I think a lot of them support me, but it's the leadership that who stood against us. When I was the one who made the phone call to the CEO of the town to ask for a letter of support back in April of 2021, and that's when I had a phone call which I just couldn't believe. During that call, I was told by the CEO, Teresa Fuller, that she lives in Wetaskiwin, and that in Wetaskiwin, the Musqueam, the people of Musqueam were doing terrible things there. She told me that they were sending people from Musqueam that they didn't want, buying them houses in Wetaskiwin, and sending the people they didn't want there to live, so it wasn't their problem anymore. She said that there were by shipping people in these places, they were devaluing the cost of their houses. They were making Wetaskiwin a very difficult place to live. And she basically was trying to insinuate that this same thing was going to happen in Bashaw if we opened up this center. She didn't even wait for me to describe what the project was. She just automatically assumed it was something bad. And it was at that point, I tried to explain to her what was happening, or that it was going to be temporary housing. It was there to help people. It was there for a wellness center. But all I was told is, well, that's a change of use. I need to go on the website and do up a development permit. And that's when I talked to my partner, James. So in the end, I just, like I said earlier, I feel I have to stand up with my friends in Musqueam and do the right thing. I can't remember who told me this last night, but there are certain people I can't say, and there's also cowards. I don't want to be that coward. I want to be able to stand up and defend these people.
And just for clarity for the attendees before I introduce Russell, and after Russell and Charlene speak, we'll take questions. As was released in the press release, this is a $4 million plus lawsuit against the town of Bashaw and the councillors involved in the deliberate obstruction of the project. There are many people who will ask, why do this lawsuit? It's going to ruffle feathers. The allegations are serious, and it's because I think the timing has never been better to actually stand up for what's right. And I anticipate there will be people who will hide behind saying we had to do this. But racism isn't always in your face. We're just in a situation where we actually have some evidence of people who were decision makers expressing prejudicial views about the project. So that's given us an ability to finally try to shed some light on the way prejudice and racism can be implemented behind the cloak of politeness and protocol. And the damage that's been done to the local First Nation communities to be rejected. And there's not anybody who doesn't know, in reality, in terms of real terms, what's happening here. Everybody knows what's happening here. And we're not going to tolerate having people stand behind protocol and say, we were just doing our job, when we know behind closed doors they were saying something. Well, I'll have Russell Burns speak right now.
As we roll around playing dominoes here. Hey, dancing get authentic. It's an honor for me to sit here with my brothers, Dr. Tony and James. You know, I'm gonna read something here. Oh, here we go. First, I'm gonna introduce my name. It's been here even before the Treaty 6 was signed, 180 years ago, and my name goes thousands of years. So what our family name is Miquapiskateo. It translates to Miquap is teepee or lodge, and Iskateo has two root words, nite, which means heart, and Isqueo, which means giver of life. These are our women. You know, these root words share that for us Nehiawak, that traditional keepers of the fire at the heart of our lodges are our women. And with these two fine men that are sitting left and right of me, this is the vision that they try to bring to Bashaw. They try to relight that, rekindle that fire that these young kiddos would be with their mothers again, right? It's a strong vision, and it's too bad it was shot down from leadership. We had a couple of town hall meetings at the center. I remember, I think the second one we were driving in, and I had to stop by the school where there was hundreds of orange ribbons hung on the fence. And then just a half a block away, there was people there that had such racist comments against these kids that were the reason why these ribbons were being tied on the fence. I mean, that's something that I just can't get over. We talk about reconciliation. 2021, I got into a terrible accident, and all I did was read. And I picked up this book, Thomas Paine, Common Sense. And there was a quote in there from John Milton, I believe. And the quote read, "Never can true reconcilement grow where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep." This is what a leadership has done to a four band not far from there, 45 minutes. I mean, words of such hate. I mean, this is what racism is. We don't need that. And with a town of 800 with 4 churches, I mean, come on, there's something has to give there. I mean, like Dr. Tony said, there's a lot of people there that, would have wanted this project to go ahead, but now we come from the Indigenous side. I don't think the Indigenous people want to be part of this community anymore. They can't trust. How can you go into a community that's so angry with their words that they use their words in such hate against us Indigenous people? That's all I have to say, All right. The Bashaw community
members in that community, the people who live there, they stand to lose as much as we do. The missed opportunity for right relations, as the Truth and Reconciliation called for. Niwago Maganak, my relatives at Musqueam, are not the only people who would benefit from the programming at this center. Think of the thousands of Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people living in central Alberta who could also benefit from this, from the programming there. The programming by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. And I'm glad I'm here today because nothing about us without us. "65% of us live in urban centers. 65% of Indigenous people live in urban centers. Bashaw Center programs could have potentially partnered, would have partnered with Red Deer Friendship Center. In fact, we had people come to the meeting initially to talk about the dream. Urban Aboriginal Voices in Red Deer is another group. Tanya, she was there. And numerous other organizations as represented by us. Last but not least, Interconnect, which is a nonprofit family services entity. And all the people that we serve through that organization. You know, it saddens me. In fact, I get emotional to think that the racism is so blatant in this day and age. When we are supposed to lift up diversity among people, and yet you see something like this. It hurt me when I read the one line in there that says we don't want those people. Something like that. It's not a direct, might not be an exact quote. I can't imagine. We have a history that's not always been bright, not always been good. And the impacts of that history one hundred percent of our families, 100% of our families are impacted by that era of residential school. I just feel total sadness when I think of the great work people are trying to do to support one another, and to continue on that healing path. Because that healing path is a lifelong journey. And this would have been one of the most beautiful programs to be in a center like there. I slept in that place and it's comfortable. It's just like, oh, we signed out. I hope you can still hear us. We got a little bit of technical problem here. Can you still hear us?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, so you know what, I mean, I could talk till I'm blue in my face, but I just want to leave you with this. We've had too many apologies, and you know, for me, an apology isn't gonna cut it. We don't need that. We need action. We need something that's gonna be different. We need we need to let people know that this is where it ends. This kind of blatant racism, this is where it ends. And it's really sad that we have to go through this route to address this, when we could have sat in a circle. And when we attempted to do that as well, numerous times. But it's I guess, go back to the words of the lawyer, that there's no choice other than this action. Thank you very much for listening. Hi.
Just to echo that, a lawsuit is generally the least desirable way ahead. But when you principals of this lawsuit don't have any avenue of appeal, the requests are falling on deaf ears, and so this is the only way to bring attention to something that was just a complete win-win scenario. You had the recent Pope visit. Everything is moving towards reconciliation, helping young families by providing a safe retreat where they can go. Instead, they encountered a stigma. As soon as it became known that First Nations people were going to be going there, all of a sudden, the way in which this business was viewed completely changed. And that stigma was applied because of a racial bias. And it is opening the wounds of people who are desperate for hope. The Pope's visit brought some hope. Recent policies from the government bring some hope. The people in the town of Bashaw, after numerous consultations with the principals, were supportive. But there were some people on town council who had financial conflicts of interest and who were concerned about property values and who were unreasonably concerned about safety, who obstructed this at every step. And the result has been further wounding of the First Nations community and the denial of these services to young, vulnerable members, young mothers and their kids who could have had a wonderful story of collaboration. So with that summary, we'll take any questions from the participants. Just raise your hand and Eli will let you in. No questions? Okay, Paige Parsons. You can just put them in the chat. Paige, what's your question? We cannot hear you. Paige, we can't hear you. Just type your question in, maybe if I can't hear you, and I can get you an answer. What day was the statement of claim filed? Has the defense been filed in response? The statement of claim was filed this morning. We have not got a response. Obviously, it'll be served today and tomorrow, but it was filed this morning. And I will email you a copy of it. What is the status of the application right now? Is it still before the town or has it been withdrawn or rejected? I'll let James answer that.
So it was rejected in last summer in August. And we'll show you the whole history of constant interference, constant requests for more information. And yeah, so right now it's been rejected for the second time. So dead.
Any more questions? What is happening in the facility at this time? Are you unable to use it for anything presently?
Currently trying to sell it and or rent it, and we're working hard to find somebody to come in. But right now it is sitting vacant.
Anybody else? You hope to open the wellness center at a different location? That's a good question.
Absolutely. You know, if the residents of Bashaw were to rally their community, who knows, maybe the First Nations would reconsider that. As again, we see a small group, a very small group of leadership that has come between this opportunity. But the First Nations are looking to be part of other communities and looking to work towards building strong relationships. So yes, there's definitely other options.
Sherry Nareen asks, why was Bashaw chosen?
So when we first purchased the building, our intent was to do seniors housing, but there were some government changes around the funding model. Bashaw was to almost 16,000 First Nations, Musqueam, largest communities in Canada, and so close proximity and the fact that there's 38 rooms in the facility located on 5 acres right on the absolutely perfect.
James, please speak directly to the computer.
Okay, sorry. So located, it was picked because of the proximity to the 4 nations at Musqueam, and the fact that there was an existing building, because it's very hard to get capital funding for buildings. And so the government model didn't have a lot of capital funding available, but this building was actually, it's 38 rooms, and had been renovated in 2016 and 17. And it was changed from a seniors model to more of a lodge model. And it sits on 5 acres within the Confederation of Treaty 6. So it was a perfect location. Often what we learned in our relationship building and just trying to understand cultural differences, the ability to take people out of their situation and relocate them into an area that you can just work on your relationships with your families and have the supports outside of your community to then go back to your community was the idea. So it was a perfect location, very easy to get to and very accommodating. And the biggest thing would be that there was a building there that would be worth over $5 million to replace right now, and it was turnkey. And honestly, Bashaw was chosen because the First Nations found willing partners that would stand with them and walk the journey and navigate the non-Indigenous world that we have now learned is nothing short of a bunch of pitfalls and obstacles and disappointments.
Okay, any other questions? All right, one new message, here we go. Stu, was the Young Spirit Winds program to be offered at Bear Hills?
No, Stu, and I appreciate you asking that question because I think we actually tried to explain that to you a few times. No, it was not the Young Spirit Winds program at all, because the Young Spirit Winds program was age 11 through 17. This is a family wellness program geared to women and children and dads and moms and grandfathers and grandmothers. And it's interesting because many times, and I'm hopeful that the media would bring out a clear truth message here, because many times, Stu, we actually tried to communicate that. I think maybe you even had an article where you called us a rehab center or a dry out center or something. Never, Stu, ever, ever, ever were intoxicated individuals coming here or people on drugs or anything. These were people that wanted to come together and reconnect with their heritage and their culture, their spiritual, their elders, their family lives, to build and grow and to help their children and nurture their families. And I think that unfortunately, when we look back in history, Stu, and I would challenge you personally in the articles that you actually covered, there was sadly a lot of information put into the public that was not factual. And we battled that all the way through. And so I'm so glad you're on the call today to finally hear and receive truth. And when you receive truth, then you must make a choice. And I have received truth and knowledge, and now I make my stand with my friends.
I think it's fair that people would be concerned if it was labeled a rehab center. That does damage, but it also speaks to institutionalized racism that would immediately want to make that conclusion and then spread that misconception, because then you can get people to fight against the program, whereas this is just a win-win program. And sincerely, I hope that we can resolve it, because I believe, and the people at the table believe, the people of Bashaw are wonderful humans, but there are some people who didn't want this to happen, and we're not going to allow protocol and politeness, that's masquerading prejudice, to win the day here. And as James said, it would have been a spectacular place for families to come, to heal, to interact with the community, and it was shot down because of prejudice. Finally, any last questions before we summarize? H. Parsons, I'm new to this story and hoping you can expand on what programming services would be available at the Wellness Center. Would there be any medical treatment available, or more of a gathering place opportunity for community and social programs? Great question. Who'd like to answer that? Dr. Tony, you want to answer that? Oh, James can.
Okay, so James gets to answer all the questions. So if, first of all, if you'd like, we could share with you some of the programming that was going to go on, and that will give you the best answers, because I don't want to say something wrong or right, because I wouldn't be the one operating the program, would have been Bear Hills. So ultimately, we were going to work with existing programs, but we were going to offer education. So there would have been teaching on site for those that may have been displaced, especially during COVID, for young students, and to get them re-engaged. There was going to be teaching on everything from resumes to job placement to secondary education. There was going to be a daycare there to work so that younger families could come in, and we would also have programs on nutrition and health, cooking, lifestyle, cooking and food. And we are also going to be working with our elders who would come in and do smudging. They would have teepee and sweat lodge ceremonies and teachings around Indigenous and holistic foods, medicines. And then we were going to work through anyone that may have had trauma. There would be people there, Indigenous trained, Indigenous led. All the programming was Indigenous led. And so when you use the words, would there be any medical treatment available? I'm not sure what you're asking, is what I would first say. But our partner was the community doctor, Dr. Tony. So it would allow people to come in for weeks to a few months, and if, say, they had a prescription for, I don't know, a cold, penicillin or whatever, we had the support services from an AHS level through our doctor to be able to come in there if somebody needed something. But again, medical treatment, I'm not sure what that means. So I hope I answered it well, but if you want to see more of our programming, I'd be happy to share it. Okay, next session. Was the Town's Council made aware of the program specific to Bear Hills Family Wellness? Was the 900-page document that was submitted? So in other words, the Town Council knew what the program was. 100%. 100%. Yes, and if you want to say something, again, 100%. Town Council knew exactly what we were doing there. And if you can imagine, that building's been there since the late 60s. We were asked to do a things like, we were approved for seniors and we had 38 rooms and some double occupancy. Could you imagine up to 90 residents? But we were told we had to do a new traffic impact assessment because we were going to have up to 25 people at a time. We were asked to give community policing plans and safety plans and just erroneous stuff that was just beyond the ask. They threw the kitchen sink at us constantly. And when you're already approved, so we're approved for retreat center, events and festivals, we could have a wedding with 300 people there. But we couldn't have 25 Indigenous. Something is wrong. And people are going to be held accountable for that. And people are coming forward every day. And I would encourage people that hear this, if you've got more to tell us, come forward, because people are coming forward because they know that there's been a wrong. And it's 2023. It's time to move forward. So yes, town council very much aware. Everyone on town council, everyone voted against us. There's councillors that were in a pecuniary interest, conflict of interest, voted against us, shouldn't even have been in the room. And that'll all come out in trial, and we'll prove that in trial. But for the residents of Bashaw, I would say this: you're an amazing community. And the actions of a few, unfortunately, cloud the water. But now is when we come together and rectify a wrong, so we can move forward in healing. And we can move forward in the reconciliation that Bashaw now needs. It's not just our First Nations friends. So to the community members, some will sit there and say, why is this happening? I would say you should go to your town council. You should ask them why we're here. This Wednesday, show up at your town council. And if you don't show up, maybe you don't care, I'm not sure. But for me as a taxpayer in that community, this should never have happened. This rests at the feet of the mayor and council and the CEO. It's yours to own. I said once, and I'll say it again, when I spoke to the council, Bashaw is going to be famous for one of Canada's first family wellness centers. I don't think this is what you want to be famous for today.
We have one more comment, Shirley.
Okay, so I want to go back to the question around programming and medical access to medical, and just it was a question around what kind of resources. Well, a lot of the teachings, all of the teachings would have been based on the medicine wheel teachings, and the medicine wheel teachings are 4 of them: physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental. And you know, I mean, that's the whole being. And there needs to be no more than that. If you have that as a foundation, that's what it takes. And somewhere along the way, people have lost, and we know all about the history of residential school, lost some teachings along the way. Need to go back and pick those up before you can reach that point. I guess I'll just even refer to Maslow's teachings, to reach that point of I think it's actual anyway, that point where you're well. So
But it wasn't going to be a medical facility. Really, the only change of use was that it was going to be focused on First Nations people. The prior change of use is pretty much the exact same. That's really the change. We will email the names of everybody who's on the call, and we will send the claims to everybody who requests it in the chat. The Zoom will remain open for 5 to 10 minutes after we stop speaking, so that you can communicate with Elia, one of my associates, who'll get you the information you need. Also on the press release, there's my email. If you have any questions, you can forward questions to me for confirmation. And I encourage you to reach out to people who are on the city council in the past or present to get their comment. Anything finally before we move? Thank you, everybody, for attending. Sorry for the technical difficulties. This is our first press conference in the Zoom environment. And I'll chat with you soon. So I'm going to mute, and you guys can talk with Ilya if you need.
If you'd like any further information, please submit it to the Zoom chat and I can get to your request.